It is a brand new Flyers Daily for Monday, the 26th of February. Flyers Daily, as always, presented by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. And Bill Meltzer joins us from PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com, and HockeyBuzz.com. And Bill, here's where I want to start. Clearly, all one-goal games are not created equal.
That's putting it mildly, yes.
I mean, what a dichotomy of one-goal hockey games we saw this weekend. Saturday, it's a 2-1 loss against the Rangers, and then Sunday, it's a 7-6 loss against the Penguins. Yeah. The only thing that's consistent about it is the Flyers didn't get any standings points.
Yeah, Flyers got not total help, but they got a little bit help, a little bit of help from some of the out-of-town score. But listen, you have to take care of your own business. I was relatively happy with the game against the Rangers. The second period was a little rough, more than a little, actually, portions of it. But the Flyers were the better team for about 2/3 of that game. Just really couldn't get to Shesterkin. A couple times I think they could have used a little more traffic in front of them. But they had some rebound opportunities, some open shots that they just couldn't bury. But I think they had enough chances. They just couldn't get that second goal, or like the Rangers had one extra bounce. But on the whole, you're playing without Konechny. I thought up and down the lineup there were a lot of gutty performances. They played well on the whole. On Sunday was an odd game because you had some guys who really stepped up big. Starting with Scott Lawton, who's now on a career best point streak. He kind of assembled it quietly at first, but the last few games he's very much been a critical part of it. And I thought Sunday was one of his best games in a long time. He was a major impact player in that game. Forster gets you 2 goals. Sanheim scores you a couple. Couturier, who'd really been fighting it for about 6 weeks, generated a couple of nice assists today. So there were guys who really stepped up. I thought there were a number of guys who really had pretty poor games.
And one of those guys has got to be Atkinson, right, Bill? I mean, he's really fighting it right now.
Atkinson is really fighting it. I like Frost's game against the Rangers. I really did not like his game against the Penguins at all. Mm-hmm. Frost was benched essentially in the third period, and it was deserved. He didn't play well. You can't really have anybody, who's a passenger on a given night, and you gotta keep your feet moving. In Frost's case, it was a game every time he got the puck, he was getting jammed because he was a little bit too stationary. So he'd get the puck in a second, he'd lose it right away. That's one of those guys that you need contributing. Farabee has had breakaways in back-to-back games. Joel has to start scoring again soon. So you had guys that you figure you're going to beat the Penguins. You need as contributors, and you had enough guys stepping up that every time you'd fall behind, they would find ways. Talk about a find-a-way league, right? Flyers would find ways to pull. I had when the game got to 4-4, Jason, I'm like, how is this 4-4? How is this 4-4?
Yeah, Eric Carlson's how, Bill.
Yeah. Well,
I thought he sucked out loud, by the way.
Yeah, that helped. The Penguins had that too. I thought it was a pretty bad game from Malkin, for example.
Yeah, agreed.
So but a little too much Sidney Crosby, more than a little too much. Flyers are still having that problem with containing other teams' superstars.
Yeah, they did such a good job of it on Saturday. It was odd because you hope Panarin. Some people tweeted me, like, did Kreider even play? Like he was a non-factor. I thought Panarin made a couple of decent plays in the game, but was really inconsequential in the Ranger game. And obviously Zibanejad, who's been a Flyer killer in the last couple of years, was real quiet as well. But Shesterkin was the star you couldn't corral. Yeah. Bill, on Saturday's game, I did on yesterday's episode, I know a lot of times the term gets thrown around, the team played really hard. They outplayed the opponent. They deserved a better fate.
Yeah.
Well, I agree that they outplayed the New York Rangers. I thought the critical mistake was the lack of traffic around Shesterkin. Yeah. So I wasn't willing to buy into that, hey, they deserved a better fate on that, because that's something that's not a bounce of the puck. that's just kind of a will to really disrupt the goalie. I didn't think they did that, and that was to their detriment.
Yeah. In a few cases, Shesterkin, you guys leave out fat rebounds too often, right? They had one, I think, early in the third period it was before the Flyers had that several shifts in a row that ultimately built up to Forster's goal. They had a pretty fat rebound right in the slot. I think it went to Atkinson. Tippett shot it. I think it rebounded right to Atkinson, and he kind of didn't handle it. Just kind of bounced away from him. You have an opportunity like that. They had one, I think, well, we talked about the Farabee breakaway earlier. That wasn't. They had a 2-on-0 that they didn't finish.
Well, they didn't execute it right.
They didn't execute it right. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, Shannon's got to shade a little bit to the side so Lawton can become an option on an angle.
Yeah, I mean you see that all the time, and it was just poor execution. At the very least, you want Shesterkin just have to rob somebody, or you shoot for a rebound, and you have the trailer to come in and grab the second shot opportunity. They had Frost inside the hash mark at the bottom of the circle, prime shooting range. He misses the net, and then in the waiting seconds, Couturier puts it off the post and across the front of the goal line, but not in. I mean, they had the looks, they had the chances. At some point, it's part of deserving. I mean, you had to finish those too. The chances are great, but you have to score.
Yeah, I know Couturier was incredibly frustrated at the end of that game with that. That's a tough one because he's on the backhand. It's bang, bang. I see that hit off the post, and I go 98 out of 100 times. It's off the goalie and goes in after that. Yeah. But somehow it avoided Shesterkin as well. They did hit 5 posts in the game, but look, when you only score 1 goal, it's going to be hard to win games in the NHL. Yeah. Give up 2, you should win, but on that occasion, they didn't. I think 2 things can be true, Bill. I said this on the radio broadcast yesterday during the Penguins game, that you can look at this weekend as 2 things. Like all the kids now, they say 2 things can be true. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And it's this, that they missed an opportunity at standings points this weekend, but it didn't really hurt them because the Devils ended up not gaining anything either.
Yeah, no, the Devils won 1 and they lost 1, but they lost the other day when the Flyers won. So so they're inching. They're inching rather than gaining a lot of ground. I'm still not honestly worried about the Penguins.
No.
And they're about to travel out for a Pacific Coast trip, and the fact they have all those games in hand, they kept mentioning on the broadcast. What that actually means is a lot of 4 and 6s, a lot of back-to-backs, right? The Penguins, as the oldest team in the NHL, they're about to get slammed on their schedule, and they're going to not have Gensel for it either.
Yeah.
So I'm not too worried about the Penguins making a push. I am a little concerned about all the injuries that are piling up on the Flyers, however.
Yeah. Before we get to that and the Drysdale injury and some of the other things they've been dealing with, can you? You're a smart guy. You're a smart hockey guy. Can you explain to me why the Penguins acquire Erik Karlsson at 3 more years at $10 million? I mean, Bill, I've seen some hideous defenders in the game.
Yeah.
That when that puck came on their side of the red line, I've never seen a guy that disinterested, other than maybe Eric Gustafsson.
Gus.
I mean, Scott Lawton skates right by him for the shorthanded goal. Tyson first goal. He just stands there.
And this is on the whole, this Penguins team, you wouldn't know from Sunday's game. But this year, the Penguins have played a lot of low-scoring games. Their problem is they haven't been able to score. But you on a team that already has Letang, you didn't really need Erik Karlsson. That wasn't that wasn't the real issue with the team. They're an old team that continued to get older. Once again, they
and expensive.
And expensive. That's it too. They have and now they have. I don't know. I mean. For several years, we were talking about the Bills going to come due the Penguins. Well, it came due last year, and it came overdue this year. And instead of doing what they need to do and start a rebuild, because they have no farm system, all of their key players, and they're a top-heavy lineup. All their key players are aging. The only guy who's really still in what you call prime age, is Gensel.
Yeah.
So and Gensel, Gensel's unrestricted after this year, and they have to move him.
Yeah.
So
the thing about the Penguins too is, they have what do they call it? The confluence there in Pittsburgh, the three rivers, right? The Monongahela, the whole thing, right? They've got a fourth river. It's called Denial. Because they took a credit card payment with 17% interest and compounded it to 50% interest.
Yes, they sure did.
I know it was a really horrific decision, but anyway, this isn't a Penguins podcast, but it's going to be nice to watch it circle the drain for a while, provided that is what happens. One last thing on the Penguins, Sidney Crosby makes it really hard to hate him as a hockey player. Yeah. I mean, 87 games against the Flyers, Bill, now 130 points. He's got a 5-point game yesterday, the 7th of his career 5-point plus game in his career, not against Flyers, but I mean, obviously he's done the most damage against them. But anyway, I'll move on past it. Let's get to the injury, Drysdale. And when he goes down the tunnel right away, Bill, I'll go, okay, it's not head. That is clearly shoulder. And you see him in the replays grab the same shoulder that he had surgically repaired for torn labrum. Yeah. This could be really, catastrophic for the Flyers. I mean, he was kind of found money because you didn't trade a rostered player to acquire him, but it also puts you in a situation at the deadline a little bit differently with, having an extra right-handed guy, right shot guy. Now, does it complicate the deadline?
I mean, honestly, I think the Flyers still need to do what they need to do. It complicates the chances of doing what you need to do and still having enough there to realistically continue to make a playoff push, even if you are trading some pieces off. But I think you still have to keep the eye where eye in the big picture here, and we still don't know some of these other injuries and how these are going to play. I will get to those in a second, I assume. But no, I think you still have to do what you need to do. It just it does complicate things in terms of continuing to try to make some kind of a push with Ristolainen out for an extended period of time. Drysdale did not look good. Did not look like a day-to-day kind of thing. It looked like something significant.
It's a real big issue. By the way, off. And then obviously Konechny's the other one who missed back-to-back games this weekend. And he's that, stir that stirs the drink or whatever you say, the straw that stirs the drink. But I agree with you. I think that this shouldn't really change anything. But do you ever remember a team that's in playoff position selling off a third of their defense, a pairing? Because Elliot reported on Saturday night on Hockey Night in Canada that a couple of teams are interested in Sealer and Walker. And I hear that and I go, oh, that's interesting. They've been the Flyers' most consistent and best pair this year. But I don't ever recall a team selling off in playoff position a pairing. And I don't recall many teams being able to acquire a pairing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would assume in that kind of a scenario, you'll get nice assets back, obviously, in return to. You might have to take a piece or two back in a contract that the other team wants to unload, and you're accepting the contract to increase the return. I would think that would be pretty much the only way it could work, because a lot of teams, I mean, the cap will go up next year, but most of the contending teams are in long-term injured reserve allowance, or they're right up against the cap and being able to. Now, I guess part of what makes Sealer this season at least attractive is that he's making nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
800.
Yeah. And
at this point, it's prorated. It's peanuts on the dollar.
Yeah. And so they can probably cap wise swing doing something along those lines. But I never recall a team in playoff position trading third of their of their decor.
I mean, it's almost bananas. And the thing about it too, Bill, is, with the relief they get on the Carter Hart contract and that they can move Ryan Ellis to LTIR, Danny Briere has a real weapon, and that is cap space. And he can retain on Walker. It's the final year of his deal. He's got a retention slot that he can use. And like you said, Sealer's not making a lot of money, and they can take on a bad contract, whether it's expiring or has a year beyond this as well, because of the cap situation that all of a sudden looks pretty healthy here.
No, for sure. So much comes down to trading from strength, having leverage, right? And the Flyers actually have leverage. I mean, it's the first time in years.
Multiple levers of leverage.
Yeah. I mean, and so they can get a little bit creative if they have to. So it sets them up well at this deadline, and also heading into the off season too. So it is still a big picture scenario. And one thing that when I'm looking at the team right now, even if the Flyers they're not buying, but even the Flyers are looking potentially at buying, I have a number of concerns about this stretch drive, and how far this team could go. One thing that you and I brought up when we did the mid-season podcast, what's working, what are our concerns, and we both raised the concern about the number of minutes that Sean Couturier was playing in the first half of the season.
Yeah, too many.
At the halfway mark of the season, Coots is averaging 20 minutes a night and playing sometimes 23, 24 minutes, almost on a game in and game out basis. The last 6 weeks have been kind of rough for Coots. Had a good game on Sunday, but we were a little bit concerned about burning the candle at both ends and what he might have left for the stretch drive, even if he's not injured. I'm hoping that he can find a second wind and work through this. I think part of the reason that his ice time has been down a little bit recently is to take a little bit of the load off his shoulders and give him a chance to get that second wind. But it's such a key thing for your best players have to be your best players. And one thing that struck me during the 4-on-4, where the Rangers scored their first goal, the Flyers were almost killed off the 4-minute penalty. Yeah, at that point. Then Panarin takes a penalty. You're going to get a power play at the end of this. You're playing 4-on-4 for 110 seconds. Couturier was not part of that 4-on-4.
No,
right? They went with Paling and they went with Lawton, the C3 and the C4 for the for that 110 seconds or whatever it was. So it did strike me, it struck me a little bit that right now how much Coots is actually kind of fighting it right now, and how critical he is of the team. Because even if he's fighting a little bit, that's the guy who you really need out there in key situations. I think part of the reason why the Flyers have had problems shutting down other teams' top lines has been that Couturier has just been a half step behind, a little bit off.
It looks like his reads are off, Bill, but I don't think it's a read is off as the body's not going where he wants it to.
That's what I think it's been,
Yeah.
And it's kind of been since the 2 games that he missed. I mean, by all indications, he's healthy now, but something just hasn't been there, and you don't worry about it for a few games. But again, it's been about 6 weeks now.
Yeah.
So that concerns me. Moving ahead. Drysdale had already been playing through some kind of nagging injury. Again, we don't know how long he's going to be out. Was really nice to see York score today because he was in a no contact jersey the other day. Left the game in Toronto the previous week, so he's obviously playing through something right now. So just having the team hold up, and obviously, I think we'd all breathe a sigh of relief if Konechny comes back this week and looks fine. Hopefully it is just a day-to-day thing. But these are key pieces right now that are going down, and the games aren't going to get easier. They're going to stay tough.
And they're a team that can ill afford to lose key pieces. And you hear me say it all the time, Bill. I don't listen to what a coach says about a player. I look at usage. Yeah. Sean Couturier played 15 minutes in that game, and he played about 17 minutes in the Ranger game. And you look at that, and that was an 11-7 situation as well. Yeah. That tells me that the usage is down because the player's fighting his game right now.
I agree.
And I think the eyes are showing that as well. Bill, goaltending down the stretch. You mentioned it before. Sandstrom, had a really rough outing in Charlotte. Obviously, the outing that Cal Peterson had is not going to cut it. The 2 dead angle short side goals are critical in this game. Yeah, there's some bounces and some tips and things like that. And those I'm willing to forgive, but the short side dead angle shots, I'm not willing to forgive.
No.
And for that, I won't forgive. and I'm going to go find them. I keep going Godfather, but do they see if Martin Jones goes on the waiver wire when Wall comes back in Toronto? Do you bring up Sandstrom? Do you stick with Calpe? What do you do here? Because you've got 15 games coming up in 30 days in March, and you can't run Ersson out there 15 times. You can't do it.
No, that's the one thing that's an absolute non-option, and we saw with the Phantoms at the end of last season too. The Phantoms really didn't have a second option. It was going to be, if it wasn't going to be Sam, it was going to be Nolan Mayer called up from Reading. You weren't going to put your season on the line with an ECHL call up. So it was a little bit like, and they just kept going with Sam, kept going with Sam. And by the time you're in the final week of the season, the playoffs, he was toast. And especially you get in the playoffs, they had a double overtime game. He was really toast for the final game. So you don't want a situation you're just going to run them into the ground. Yeah, you need two goalies in the league, especially with such a busy stretch coming up in March. It's there's no two ways around that. I don't know, Jason, what the solution is. I wish that Sandstrom were playing better right now.
Yeah, to make himself an option.
I think part of the reason not just part of the reason, a major reason why the Phantoms are looking up and trying to battle into a playoff spot. They're in 7th place in their division, has to finish in the top 6. Has been that neither goalie has been very reliable. Their best goalie has been Parker Gahagen, right? And no offense to him, he's actually done a nice little job, but that's not, he's not the guy they envision.
Yeah.
Going into this year being their most consistent goalie. Neither Felix nor Cal has been reliable enough. Has delivered saves when they've needed them. Has been able to, maybe they'll have a good period and make some big stops in that period. And then the next thing you know, a bad one goes, something short side or something 5-hole that, with clear sighted. So that'll it'll just torpedo you. It happened. Somehow the Phantoms won on Saturday. I watched it. That was a really crazy game. And actually,
Lixo was good.
Yeah. Lixo was really good, and he was really good on Sunday too.
Yeah,
in Pittsburgh, and Bobby Brink too. Those two stepped up big, and Emil Andrek stepped up too. Just those. But you're not figuring coming back 2 times from 2 goals down in the third period to win that in overtime. Somehow they pulled it out. They tied it in the last minute, and they won in the final 15 seconds of overtime. It was a pretty crazy, exciting finish. But I mean, part of why they had to keep coming back was Felix wasn't making saves.
Yeah,
and I don't know calling Felix up now would change things. You change things just to change them? I don't know.
Just a different name on the back of the jersey, the same result.
Just a different name on the back of the jersey, right? So if a Martin Jones becomes available on waivers, I think maybe you do claim him. I'm not in favor of trading for a goalie, expending an asset.
Totally agree.
But I'm also not in favor of just saying, well, we're stuck and watching what we watched today. That just is not gonna work in any NHL city. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, you do want to see this thing through the playoffs, and maybe the weakness of the bottom part of the division is the saving grace here. The other thing with playing a guy, I truly believe this. Deadening a player from overuse, deadening a goaltender from overuse is irreversible, in my opinion. We've seen it before, whether it was Steve Mason years ago, or at one point we saw with Brian Elliott, if I recall, and we've seen it with goalies over the years, that when you deaden them from overuse, there's no reclaiming, getting that back for that season. It's just, it's an irreversible situation. And the other element of that is when you do deaden a goalie from overuse, the risk of injury is monumentally higher.
High. Yeah.
And if you lose Sam Ersson because of overuse and an injury that's sustained as a result of that, pack it up, because then you're in real trouble.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's you know, I mean that's the disaster scenario is Sam going down. But you're right. You're right. Overuse absolutely increases the risk of of a guy who a couple seasons ago missed most of the season. I think with groin surgery.
Yep.
So you do have to be mindful of that a little bit too, where you're just but besides, but it just honestly comes down to common sense, right? You just don't manage it that way. They will need a second goalie, but they need NHL caliber goaltending. It's not going to be the situation that it was, when it was Hart and Arson, where every night you're going to be in there. Situation is what it is. You're just going to have to make do with the best you can. But there has to be something better, whether it's waivers or whatever the case might be. There has to be something you can do here, because with more back-to-backs and those kind of things coming up, you can't risk it. They rolled the dice this weekend. You saw what happened. I don't think you can risk it again.
Yeah, Martin Jones, not that I'm beating the drum for him, but that just seems to make there's a familiarity with Kim Dillabaugh and Martin Jones. Obviously, he was here. So if he were to go on waivers, I think that would make a lot of sense, but we'll see how that plays out. What about Kolosov to the rescue, Bill, when his season ends in the KHL? I don't think he comes into the NHL, but
I was going to say,
that'd be unfair to him.
I think you'd like to get him some games in the American League, get used to the smaller rink. Get used to the language, right? Get used to some of the off-ice stuff. Just get into a routine. It's to me just unfair to ask him to come right in, jump right into the NHL. Now, years ago Sergei Bobrovsky did that, but I'm not expecting Kolosov to be Sergei Bobrovsky. Bobrovsky was a special case. So
the thing with Kolosov is, I was talking to somebody about him. And he's going to have to put some guardrails on his game, because he's very aggressive, very dramatic goaltender. Yes. Takes a lot of ice. You can get away with that over there, And the biggest thing he's going to learn coming to North America and coming from the KHL, and all goalies go through this that come over. And I remember Varlamov talking about this during the lockout when he came back. He had to relearn how to play in NHL traffic, because they don't put traffic around the net there. Their players aren't going to get hit by a straight puck. No way, right? So he's going to have to learn to fight through screens, layered screens.
Getting
that's
bumped
all they do
around the net. Over there, the way the games are called, basically any contact with the goalie around the net isn't almost an automatic penalty.
Yes.
Over here, certainly not the case here. That absolutely is a pretty darn big adjustment that every goalie coming over has to go work through.
I have to dig up that quote from Varlamov, because it was fascinating. He played for like 4 years here. And then when he came back, he was a mess right away, because he got used to the KHL during the lockout, and came back and was like, oh my God, I got to redo everything again as I get back into playing in the NHL with the league resuming. Bill, Michkov's season has ended. He dealt with the pneumonia this year, and obviously the situation early in the season ends up with Sochi. But when you look at his year, I think he averaged, 0.87 points per game in draft +1. By all accounts, a very successful year. But now the calls are out there. They need to charter a jet and get him out of there. I know that's easy to say, hard to do. Yeah. First of all, an assessment on Michkov's season. And second, is there a chance that he could be over here after 1 year in the Continental Hockey League?
Well, let's start with this season this year. Listen, he started out with Ska in St. Petersburg. Had differences with the coach.
Rottenberg.
Roman Rottenberg. Thankfully, we haven't had to mention his name in months.
Yep.
But his rights still belong to Ska, and Rottenberg still is, a very major, powerful force in the KHL and within Russian politics too.
Yep.
So he's a force to be reckoned with over there. So getting him away from Ska to Sochi, even though Sochi was a poor team, they played over their heads for a little while, and then reality set in. That was the thing. That was the thing with Michkov this year, was that he wasn't picking up too many gimmies. Most of his goals he really had to earn on his own.
Yeah.
Very, very good setup guy. I was surprised. I probably watched about 2/3 of his games. And and then highlights are pretty much the other ones. I always thought he was a goal scorer. He's a really clever passer with fantastic ice vision. He's really. I think he's the player that everybody's hoping he would be when the Flyers drafted him. And he finished 1 point shy of setting basically the equivalent of a rookie record in the KHL would be. And if you look at what company he's in, virtually every one of them. Yeah. Virtually everyone has gone on to be an NHL star.
Whether that's Kaprizov, Kucherov, Ovechkin. I mean, you're talking about. Yeah. Yes. I mean, look, Kucherov got his 100th point just hit
that mark in February. Yep.
Yeah.
But I mean, what he's done over there is comparable, and a lot of those guys had better teammates around them.
Yeah.
So I mean, there are certainly things that Michkov will and even over there will have to learn. So has to get better off the puck.
Yep.
He takes a lot of risks. For a guy who takes as many risks as he does, they don't backfire too often. He usually seems to keep the puck. I think certain things that he'll do at times, like turning his back, moving the puck up the ice towards his own net for a second. If Torts is his coach, that's not going to fly.
Yeah, straight ahead. Yeah.
Keep going north.
Yeah.
So there's definitely going to be adjustments to make in terms of some of that stuff. Off the puck play. I mean, he'll make some good plays, but there are times when he can get a little bit lost in the D zone. I mean, that's still something he has to work through. But he just turned 19 years old. He absolutely has superstar offensive upside, and it's not hard to predict that he's going to be a pretty good impact player in the NHL, maybe a major impact player in the NHL. All that ability is there. In terms of bringing him over this offseason, I mean, that's I think that goes higher than our floor, right?
Yeah, it's higher than our pay grade.
I don't even know what the machinations would be to be able to do that. It's years ago, players would play in tournaments like the Worlds or something, and you could kind of secretly meet with them, and maybe if you remember
with the handler for a little bit.
Yeah. If you remember Malkin, and this was after Malkin came over, the Soviet Union had already fallen, but there was this whole drama about him so-called re-signing with his team over there, and then he snuck out.
Yeah,
and he snuck out and went to Pittsburgh, but that he didn't do that from Russia. I forget where they were at the time, but he had to go through a third country to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I think with Michkov, if you do that, you have to bring other family members over. His mom, he just lost his father a year ago. Yeah. So there's a whole lot. There's a whole lot in there. I mean, I'm going to assume that he has to play out his contract over there until he comes over, until such a time when maybe that could be negotiated, or maybe that might otherwise change. But he still has 4 more years to go to serve and it tells you also how lopsided those contracts are too, because he signed when he was 16. Yeah. They already saw he was a prodigy, so they locked him up in a really long-term deal. How does he know what he's signing, right? And all he wants to do is play hockey anyway, and it's a chance to go right and play against men at 16. You're not even thinking that many years down the line. Yeah. So, but it's just different system. It's the way things work over there. When the Flyers could bring him over, when that time might be, hopefully sooner than later. But even if you do have to wait, I'm pretty confident he'll be worth the wait, however long that wait is.
Yeah, the thing with him is obviously diminutive in stature. He's not the biggest guy.
Yeah, but thick.
He scores a lot of his goals in tight. Because he's crafty, and those guys that are small-ish like that but thick are a real bear to knock off a puck. It's that low center of gravity type thing. And the work that he does in tight around the net, whether it's distributing and elite vision, as we can see. I mean, he looks like he's got all the I won't call him generational because I use that term very sparingly. I mean, to me, there's only been, Crosby's a generational player. Ovechkin's generational. McDavid is. I don't put Matthews in the generational category. Superstar, yes. Generational, no.
Yeah.
You got to reserve that. I know people want to throw that term around every year, like with multiple guys. Oh, Jack Eichel's generational. My ass, he ain't generational.
Yeah, no, for sure. To me, a generational player is the guy who changes the game as you know it. That's where the level from a superstar to a generational player goes.
Yeah.
Eric Lindrom's a generational player because he was basically a linebacker on skates, but he had finesse too.
Yeah, hands of butter and
I
mean, like Bill Berge.
All of a sudden, every team was signing huge defensemen to just specifically to try to play against Lindros. The league got so much bigger because he was at the top of the league. He changed the way the game was played. I mean, and some of the effects weren't great in terms of all the clutching and grabbing and some of that stuff, but a guy who comes in and he changes the way the game is played as you know it at a particular time.
I think Bedard will do that too.
And Bedard certainly has that ability. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you just look at the raw numbers of what he did in years comparable to guys like McDavid, and it's frankly disgusting. And he's got a lot to learn in the NHL, but he's going to be spectacular. Are they going to be able to put any pieces around him? They certainly haven't yet, because that team is horrific, the Chicago team. Let's wrap it up there, Bill. It'll be an interesting week. We'll see Nikita Kucherov coming up Tuesday. We'll see on Friday the Washington Capitals, and we'll see Ovi. So we referenced a couple players. And Saturday it'll be the Ottawa Senators and Claude Giroux back in Philadelphia as well. So important games to come. We'll see how it plays out. We'll see about the health of both Drysdale, Konechny, and others, and we'll see where this goes as they say, as like sands through the hourglass. These are the days of our Flyers' lives. Read Bill's work at PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com, and HockeyBuzz.com. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll preview Flyers Bolts on a brand new episode of Flyers Daily.